Hey everyone, and welcome to the Private Podcast, where we plug in and explore the intersection of privacy, human rights, technology, and democracy. I'm your host, Derek E. Silva. Today, joining me on the Private Podcast is Roneil Rumburg. Roneil is the co-founder and CEO of Audius, a digital audio streaming service that connects fans directly with artists and exclusive new music. This is Roneil's second time on the show, and we're really glad to have him back. And now over to the conversation with Roneil Rumburg. All right, and as I mentioned off the top, we have Roneil Rumburg, founder, co-founder of Audius. Roneil, thanks for coming back on to the show. Last time you were on, it was called Follow the White Rabbit. We've since rebranded it to the Private Podcast. But yeah, thanks for coming back.
Thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Terrific. So, as I just alluded to, you were on the show a little over a year ago with Alex, the previous host. Can you give us an update on what Audius has been up to since I think it was last June 2021? What you guys been up to, success you're having, things like that with the platform?
Yeah. So things have been really good for us. The usage of the network has been growing quickly, and this year, I think the big focus for the community is around fleshing out more monetization tooling. So giving artists tools and the ability to actually start to charge fans for different
Hmm.
activities, engaging with them. But yeah, it's been a really good year. Today, seeing about 7 million fans listen to stuff on Audius every month, around 250,000 artists, and I think now just north of 1 million tracks. So yeah, it's been really great to to see all of this come to pass, and yeah, we're excited. Excited to be kind of continuing that growth while also fleshing out these tools for artists. So yeah, and at a super high level, as a reminder for folks, Audius is a music community and discovery platform that puts the artist in control. And that last piece is really what we see the key differentiator here being between Audius and other opportunities for music distribution. Yeah, Derek, you got it up right there. That's
I do have
yeah.
it, yeah. I have quite a few followers, and I'm not sure why. But
Well,
I do have a bunch of people, I guess, who are following what I listen to and what I love and recommend and stuff like that. So, in that sense, it's been interesting to be part of on the listener side, where like other platforms do. Spotify has some social ish stuff, right? Like
mhm.
I can make a playlist, I can share it out with other people, but I feel like that's an area where Audius has leaned in pretty heavily about like making basically more or less everybody's profile public, and obviously you can use a pseudonym. I use my real name because I just do. But lots of other people don't. That's fine, and you end up getting like, oh, it's almost like Twitter followers, where like I'm listening to stuff, I hit the heart button, and then other people get to see like, oh, Derek really liked this song. I'm gonna listen to it too. Whether they see that I listen to a lot of electronic music or rap or whatever, and hopefully they're discovering new artists as well. So you were talking about still building out some monetization tools and things like that, or that's what's happening right now. Can you talk a little bit about how this decentralized music platform? I'm not even sure what other players are out there right now. It seems to be almost entirely Audius, if not entirely Audius. But how things have evolved since you guys started Audius and that initial launch a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago.
Yeah, so the launch was about 2 years ago, and yeah, the evolution there I think has been lots and lots of new features and tools for artists. So everything from being able to showcase NFTs and in our parlance collectibles on your page for folks to be able to purchase and engage with, to tipping. So you can now
Hmm.
actually, like, if you go on an artist profile, you can tip them and get on this leaderboard for the artist. So there's a kind of a top 10 tippers for every artist that kind of changes over time as people tip and whatnot. So yeah, that's there have been some pretty fun dynamics around there. And then yeah, the bigger story I think is just the growth. So when the platform first launched, there was no one using it, right? And
Of
it took
course.
time. It took time to build up to where things are today, but yeah, it's been a lot of fun to kind of get to go through that with the community. And I think we've, as a team, kind of building out Audius, we've been really, really humbled to see how excited folks have gotten um, about everything around Audius, right, and what it kind of means for them as a creator and as an artist.
Cool.
So yeah, things have been really good. I think it's also been cool to see kind of this broader Web3 music crossover ecosystem flesh out. And to your point, there's now much more of an ecosystem there than I think there was like 2, 3 years ago when it kind of felt like it was just us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you probably started off with an MVP of some kind, or something that you were happy to call V1, and obviously you got to build and iterate from there. That's a classic way to do things. And before you blow your brains out trying to think of every possible feature a fan or an artist could want, you put it out there and you see what kind of feedback you get, and you start iterating from there. And I've seen a lot of, I know you guys have put out a lot of app updates for the mobile app itself, and I've seen some of those through. To be honest, I don't use it as often as I should. It's one of those apps that I have it on my phone. It's there. I need to drag it into my entertainment folder to make sure it's more front and center. Um, but I hopped into it earlier to refresh my memory and see what was in there, and lots of activity. And I earned one audio recently for
Amazing.
hitting a milestone of some kind. The tipping, is that done in audio, or is that done in other currencies?
It's done in audio, so that's kind of most typically what folks already have access to in Audius. But that said, it's worth noting, we don't see sort of the entire economy around Audius being denominated in the token. We think that will there will be kind of different options available to folks. The token's really meant to power the kind of hosting and operation of the network, and it's meant to help distribute control of Audius to the community. When we say Audius puts the artist in control, this is kind of one of the ways that we do that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, maybe for people who don't know, and also to talk a little bit about what's coming up in the future and recent going ons, a little bit of I guess preface. So, node hosting, the token, governance, I think a few other things. Those are on Ethereum, but a lot of the stuff that happens really frequently, so listening and tracking listens, and probably some other things, you can probably expand on that. That actually happens on Solana. Um, Solana's been having, I guess, semi-frequent downtime recently, unfortunately. I know they still say that the mainnet is in beta, but it's out there. It's being highly used by Audius and a bunch of other games and NFT collections and stuff like that. How have you guys been dealing with that side of things with the downtime? Are you running your own nodes? You have your own RPC, so it's at least most stuff's getting through still, or are you just, I don't know, trying to build around it?
Yeah, no. So, the Audius product relies on the public third-party RPC providers that exist, and yeah, I mean, I think to your broader point, like new new platforms and new developer tooling, like there's a growing pains, right, and a growing period. Fortunately, those I think those issues are mostly behind Solana today. It's been a few months since I think we've seen significant instability on the network. But yeah, I would just chalk it up to it's sort of the positive aspects of growing and doing well, right? As a network for them. It's just, it is tough for the folks building on it. So how we build around it though, and then how we kind of think about that going forward. There are fallbacks in the Audius network where it can actually sort of queue transactions and actions that a user has done, but reflect to the user immediately those actions being completed.
Yeah.
So there's a trade-off there, right? So like when folks get confused, for example, if they think something has happened and then they like tell their friend, oh, go look at like my profile, and then their friend can't see it, right? But combining that with, there's a little banner that said, oh, hey, like there's some instability in the network, like things will be resolved in a few hours or a day. People were pretty understanding of, and it didn't impact our community in really a significant way. The yeah, the kind of the thing that also was helpful there, has been helpful there, I think, is that yeah, like the mechanisms for all of that kind of queuing and failover and whatnot, those have been in the network since day one. Like the the first version of Audius actually relied on this thing POA network, which is an Ethereum
Oh yeah.
sidechain from like forever ago.
Right.
And that ecosystem has had its own fair share of instability as well. So a lot of those like retry mechanisms and sort of these, that queuing model that I mentioned, kind of already existed from that prior
Cool.
context. But yeah, it's definitely, it was a frustrating thing as it happened, but I had confidence at least that the team would figure their way out of it, and we just gave them space to do that. Wouldn't be helpful for us to try to stick our heads into that. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, ultimately, you have what you hope are experts, working on that side of things, and you guys could, I would, if I were you, I would definitely be focusing on that building around stuff. The queuing, I think, is really smart, and
Mhm.
great idea to have that in from day one. And yeah, I could still see things locally, and then eventually, the app will sync up with the network,
Mhm.
push those changes, just like almost like an HTML5
Yeah.
offline app would. HTML5 storage. Yeah, we'll store all these Google Doc changes, and then when we can connect to Google Docs again, we'll push them all, and things will sync up again. So totally
Mhm.
understand that. That's really smart. Um, to focus on I guess a couple other platforms and how Audience sees itself. So Apple Music obviously really leaning into the radio side of things, bringing back personalities and that sort of thing, which sometimes I like, sometimes I don't. Depends on the personality. But I stopped listening
Mhm.
to normal terrestrial radio a long time ago because I got tired of people mostly talking about issues they know nothing about, but like trying to keep the morning show going, and I'm so over this. So I switched to podcasts and streaming almost exclusively for that reason. Spotify is like helping bands sell vinyl, and according to a recent leak, tickets now potentially direct to concerts instead of referring them to Ticketmaster and stuff like that. So they've both got their specific positioning. I have no idea what's going on with SoundCloud right now. It's not a platform I use very often, and then Deezer, TuneIn, etc. I pay very little attention to. But how do you use, besides, I guess, putting the artist in control, as you mentioned earlier, having governance with a token and all that. Are there any other ways that Audius sees that, like, you and team see, or the community see yourselves differentiating further and further from Spotify, Apple Music, the other streaming services?
Yeah, so I think the key difference is, it's exactly as you mentioned, that putting the artist in control, but that manifests itself in a lot of downstream consequences. The biggest ones being the kind of level of data and understanding that an artist gets about their fan base. how they're finding the music, how much they're engaging with it, who their top fans are, how to hyper serve that group. Those are all kind of questions and things that can be answered using Audius, and that's kind of the direction that we've been kind of heading in for a long time. So I think that's kind of the key difference we see between us and these other DSPs. There's no, like, artists don't actually use, well, typically at least, they don't use Spotify or Apple Music, right? The music there is coming through a distributor, which is potentially coming through some other intermediary before it's actually touching the artist team or the folks around them.
Right.
That's why there is this kind of missing information and other things that come from that, because it's not, there's no kind of direct relationship between Spotify and an artist, for example. So yeah, that's I think the big difference. But to your point, it's interesting to see some of these folks starting to head in that direction. So Spotify, through a lot of their public work, at least, is starting to experiment around this direct fan engagement angle. It's going to be interesting to see how they try to find a connection to the artist, because I think right now they don't really have that. It's just it's a very different way of thinking about the product, right? Where, like you said,
Right.
Audius is by its nature a very social product, and has those social dynamics kind of baked in from day one. Spotify is mostly a single player sort of experience, right? When
Right.
you use Spotify, you're not really interacting with your friends there, or what have you. Really, the only mechanism to do that is via a playlist, but you're certainly not interacting with, and you don't perceive yourself to be interacting with an artist in some capacity. So yeah, that's been interesting. I think Apple Music and some of the others are even further kind of disconnected from the artist. Deezer and whatnot being similar. SoundCloud is the one that's different, right? Because
Right.
SoundCloud does have that kind of direct upload, direct engagement sort of approach, especially combined with comments and some of the other dynamics there. We definitely see Audius kind of going after and heading in the same direction as SoundCloud. That's kind of that's the use case and the model that we think there's space in the market to go after, just because SoundCloud has kind of, so the SoundCloud of today, it's also worth noting, is very different from the SoundCloud of 6, 7 years ago or so.
Yeah.
So SoundCloud today behaves kind of like any other DSP. It's a subscription model. You have content from all the major labels, publishers, etc. It's all the same content that you find everywhere else, right? And in that kind of evolutionary process for them, they lost the relationship with the fan at the end, or sorry, yeah, with the artist at the end of it, right? Because people aren't directly uploading to SoundCloud anymore for the most part.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting, very interesting dynamics around all of this, but no one's really figured out how to get UGC in audio to work, or to work well, at least.
I think the one thing I really enjoyed about SoundCloud for probably the year or two that I used it pretty heavily was the ability to actually comment on a specific part of the song.
Yeah,
I don't know if Audius has that yet, or if anybody's thinking about bringing that in, but I guess that would work a lot better on the web player, but or on the web in general. But that was like the one thing where I could be like, yes, there's the drop, and like like
yeah.
mark it. Like I can even mark a clip here in Riverside now, but like I gotta know it's coming before I can't just rewind the conversation and drop it in after. But like that for me, like that was a lot of fun. Identify and providing that feedback direct to the artist of like, I loved this like 30-second
Yeah,
run up, or the beat drop was like in the perfect location or whatever. That I really enjoyed. Otherwise, yeah, I found some independent, some cool independent stuff there, but yeah, the whole platform really, I don't know, started to fall sideways, and then think got bought out by a German company, which obviously is, a lot more focused on profitability than, any decentralized, community governed platform is going to be worried about, at least for the in the near term. Speaking of which, last year when you talked to Alex, some pretty big names had recently joined the platform. There was a list. I know Dead Mouse was on that list, a fellow Canadian. Um, like, have you seen any other, really big name artists join Audius over the last year or so, and hopefully achieve some success?
Yeah, it's been really cool to get to see artists of all shapes and sizes get to get value from Audius. So there are 250,000 artists on Audius today, but some highlight names that folks might know are like Zed or Skrillex or
Hmm.
Dylan Francis, Disclosure. It's been really cool to see. A lot of folks with really large followings still getting value out of Audius and still finding,
Yeah.
a community here that's engaged with them, that's excited to see them here, and all of that. So it's been fun, man. Yeah, it's one of the most fun parts of getting to work in this space is these people who I've been following their music for years and years, like using software that we built is really a cool thing.
Yeah.
It's kind of wild, and especially for our broader community and ecosystem of artists on the up and coming side. For example, like they get to chat with a lot of these folks in Discord, right? And they can just like Joel Zimmerman, Deadmau5, just hopped in the Discord one day and started like randomly messaging, and people were like, "Oh my god, this is wild!" Like, it's just super fun, right? And I think that fun energy, more so than anything else, is what's really made our community something special, and just a really great kind of heartwarming place to be. Like everyone's just here to vibe, hear some good music, and have a good time.
Yeah, I would say it's probably a lot more interesting to govern over a music platform than it is over most DeFi platforms. It's like
Yeah,
Maker. I
it
mean,
just draws a
MakerDAO
different
is like,
type, right? Yeah.
yeah, like MakerDAO is hugely important. DAI and where it goes, and all these new things that they're doing with TradFi organizations, very important, super cool in the long run, and especially if you're into finance. But like, it's just not the it's not the sort of thing that gets me up in the morning. I'm like, yes, can't wait to get involved in that governance discussion over Maker and like what they're, whether to shut off the direct mechanism that Aave uses to mint DAI or whatever. Like, it's just not for me. There are people who would that gets them going, and that's great. But like, I'd be much more. I think most people would be much more interested to have these debates and
Hmm.
governance, discussions over something like Audius instead. And sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just agreeing with you. I think I think you're totally right. And we've seen that kind of bear out. Everyone has an opinion on music one way or another, right? I think it's kind of in some ways a universal language. Almost everyone at least has some affinity to some type of music, and oftentimes that leads to a level of passion about how they get to listen to music and how they find their music, and from the creator side, how they're reaching their fans, right? That passion has kind of carried through to our community. I think because more than anything else, people feel heard here, right? They feel like they have a voice, and that when they do voice these things, and more so than voicing them, right? If for the smaller subset of folks who know how to develop and write things, those folks have been able to contribute directly here as well. So yeah.
Cool. Um, is it just music at this point? I mean, the name is Audius, which implies audio, which obviously there's you could do spoken word, you could do ebooks, you could do audiobooks, stuff like that. Are people using Audius for that sort of content right now? Is it part of the roadmap to help better enable 30, 60 minute, 90 minute files as well?
Yeah, the quick answer there is it's definitely the network's ambition to serve all forms of audio. Today, the majority of usage is music, but there are quite a few podcasts that are out on Audius as well. So it's there is some of both. Yeah, yeah, and there are even with podcasts there are some specific features like rather than next track, previous track being the buttons, you get the like skip forward 30 seconds, skip back 30 seconds,
Nice.
sort of thing. So
It's
um
definitely something I'm missing from Apple Music. There's so many times where I'm like, I just want to go hear that little bit. And I'm driving in the car, so if I hit back, it's gonna go all the way back to the beginning of the
yep,
song. I'm like, I don't want to go to the back. Pocket Casts give me the ability to actually
yeah,
customize, how much time I want to go back and go forward. Or even it's a song I really like. It's a song I've heard lots of times before. I'm in a boring part, right? I want to skip ahead to like what I know is
hmm
coming up, maybe especially if it's like a 10-minute song because there are a few of those, especially in EDM. I just want to skip, but I can't.
yeah.
I'm not gonna pull up my phone and basically text and drive, be like scrubbing for the next 30 seconds. So I tough it out, which obviously is not a huge inconvenience for my life, but that's great. Those sorts of things. And I don't know why other people or why other teams, product managers, etc. won't do that sort of thing, but that's awesome, especially if it's applied on any track. But or at least the ability to say like this is an ebook or an audiobook and therefore
hmm
enable these extra buttons.
Yeah, and you get at a really good point. Like, what's actually the thing to infer? I think in the current behavior, it's just if the track is longer than a certain length, the buttons switch
Mm-hmm.
over. Because if a track is like 10 minutes plus, it's you know probably useful to be able to skip around within the track, or
Yeah.
more useful to do that than to skip to next
Yeah.
previous. But we can keep the other buttons as well. They're just a little bit smaller and less prominent, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, um, yeah. So anyway,
Which
yeah,
is, I
it's
mean,
it's
what
fun.
CD players used to give you, right? You'd be used to, whether you had to hold the button down to fast forward or whatever. I used to have a Sony Discman or something like that, Panasonic probably back in 1999, and but I could fast forward the track or I could skip, or
Yeah,
I could rewind the track or I could go back to the beginning or back to the
totally.
previous track. There was so much freedom that all of a sudden you had, and yet it feels like a lot of that musical choice freedom is being taken away at the for simplicity's sake or whatever BS
hmm
product managers want to come up with or UI designers want to come up with. I'm like, yeah, but if you just gave me two extra buttons, I'd be a lot happier.
Yeah. No, and it's yeah, people don't talk often enough about what we gave up in each of these, media transitions, right? Like they're, arguably the recorded music industry started with vinyl, right? And then there were various forms of tape, 8-track cassette, etc., and then CDs, and then there was like the iTunes buy and download tracks paradigm, and then there was
Yeah.
streaming ultimately, and that was the most recent shift at least. Um, so I would posit that like this direct fan engagement decentralized tools is the next of those platform shifts to happen to the way people consume music and interact with their artists. But yeah, that aside too, you're right. Each of those transitions gained some things and gave up some things. A lot of
Yeah.
people point to the transition from analog mediums to digital when CDs came about as being a really key pivotal moments. There's still people that swear by their analog media because it is like from a theoretical perspective at least you can reproduce a continuous signal in analog, right? But in digital you can't. So there is some
Right.
information being lost. Now whether that information that's lost in that transition is something that we as humans can perceive, that's up for debate, right? But you can certainly tell the difference between analog and digital mediums when you listen to them. But I find it's
Sure.
typically the difference is coming from hearing artifacts like tape hiss in vinyl, the
Hmm.
crackling and the popping. When you hear those
Yeah.
things, you're listening to some analog thing, right? But
Yeah.
because there's noise and you can't denoise. But yeah, so with CDs, we did get this like perfect lossless, from a digital perspective at least, lossless replica of content. And then with streaming, we've kind of regressed back to, and downloaded music regressed back to all these compression mechanisms and the compression artifacts that come with them. So it's kind of crazy, like when you talk to an artist, like what an end user is hearing on the other side, listening on their like AirPods or like your wireless headphones, is so different because of the compression, because of like Bluetooth also compresses to send audio
Yeah.
to your earphones. All of that is very different from what the artist would hear in the studio, right? And it's
Yeah.
it's
But
it's just interesting, right?
we can't all afford studio monitors
Yeah, well, and it's
or
also like the
studio quality
space it would take up
headphones.
and everything.
Yeah.
But it's not even an option, right? The information that you need with respect to that level of lossless fidelity, that's like not really something you can find. So
Yeah.
yeah,
We'd all need a really nice DAC attached to our iPhone or Android
yes,
phone, digital audio converter, I think it's called, for anybody who doesn't know what a DAC is, and a 1/8 inch or quarter-inch headphone jack on the other end of that DAC, plugged right in. Some really nice $600 Panasonic or Sony, monitor, like headphones,
yeah,
like. A, nobody wants to do that anymore. B, that's very expensive, especially for people in developing countries. And C, we go right back to where we were with music being a super exclusive thing
yeah,
in the Middle Ages, the Renaissance times, etc., where like you needed to be able to afford tickets to the orchestra or to the opera,
hmm,
basically. And like that obviously doesn't help anybody. You want, at least most artists I know, want
totally,
everybody to be able to listen to their music and figure out whether they like it, not to have this super exclusive fan base that you know you constantly need to pester to buy
yeah.
tickets, when obviously you have other ways to earn revenue from it. Speaking of other ways to earn revenue, you talked a little bit about building up different monetization tools. Like what's the Audius community been talking about, or what are they building right now, and where do you see things heading over the next couple of years in terms of direct fan access, maybe selling tickets. You talked about collectibles, NFTs. Like what do you think is coming up over the horizon for fans and artists alike on Audius?
Yeah, I think there are two key network level primitives, which are payments and programmable content access and feature access. Well, I guess maybe that's three things instead of two. But with
That's okay.
those things, you can, as an artist, actually compose very different forms of monetization. So some examples of that we think folks are going to be playing around with in the next like 6 months or so are everything from tip gated content access. So like I need to tip you $1 to get to listen to something that you've uploaded or things like that,
Mm-hmm.
to direct artist subscriptions. So me being able to subscribe to you as a fan, and get access to some exclusive portion of catalog in exchange for that, and potentially some exclusive engagement mechanisms, like so being able to comment on your tracks. Maybe I can only do that if I'm in your fan club, and then
Okay.
reducing the noise by that amount, the artist actually will read them and react to them, and then there's some
Yeah.
feedback loop there. Um, so yeah, that's kind of the rough structure we see playing out here. And when you combine payments and that programmable accessibility, you can actually at a higher level create all of these different business models around that. And folks will sort of experiment with those and start to discover like what's resonating with people in the community, what's not, and yeah.
Is there any opportunity to actually like integrate with existing platforms? Like the first example you gave sounds, vaguely similar to something like Patreon. There are some decentralized protocols that are trying to build that already. Is there an opportunity to just integrate that, or is there a vision to build everything in house and make it like a super, make it feel first party and super integrated into the platform instead of, oh, you got to click here and go there, and regardless of interchain messaging and stuff like that, you're off onto a different platform eventually.
Yeah, I think it is a really key trade-off you're getting at between, friction and interoperability, right? And I think this is something a lot of folks don't pay much attention to in decentralization or this kind of Web3 land, right? Is that the kind of benefit of decentralized tools being composable and everything else is great in theory, but in practice, I don't think consumer thinking and consumer behavior is trained towards them composing like five different Legos together to get to some use case at the end of it.
Yeah.
In DeFi, I think what's interesting about composability is that developers can build products that are leveraging different things, right? And that's a very
Right.
different paradigm from as an end user consuming one of those things. Like I don't know, what's a good example, like maybe YFI or projects like that, where they are kind of sitting on top of many other different protocols.
Yeah.
As an end user, like my relationship is with Yearn, right? It's not kind of with all of those underlying things. Similarly here, there's like I said, there's trade-offs there. So all of the increase in friction that would come from kind of those integrations with third party folks. Like I believe it should be possible to integrate things in that way within Audius if someone
Yeah.
wants to, which it is. It is right now, and it will be forever. But I think that's very different from, is that something people are actually going to use? And time again, what we've seen with our community among the folks that do have Patreons, for example, the lack of top of funnel in Patreon, or like the inability to kind of build up, a fan base that's sort of not paid and then convert those people
Right.
into paid, tends to lead to this very, very low conversion rate from fan of artists to, I'm subscribing on their Patreon, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
half the
Mm-hmm.
time you don't even know they have a Patreon. You'd have to probably see it on their Twitter or their Instagram or something, and then you click through,
Yeah.
and then the experience of listening to exclusive content, for example, behind that is just not, it's not great, right?
Yeah. I'm a Patreon subscriber to a couple, and so like you can use the Patreon app, but frankly, it sucks. Um, and I have it. The web app is really not any better, and it's actually worse in some ways. and um, and then otherwise, it's like, oh well, you can get the RSS feed and put it into Pocket
Mm,
Casts or Apple Podcasts or whatever. I'm like, okay, great. But the process of going to find the RSS
yeah.
feed is like literally a 5 or 6 click process, and you got to know exactly where to go. And if you miss it, you're like, oh great, I'm back into the Patreon app. So like I'm smart enough, and I'm willing to put in the effort that I've done that. So Daily Tech News Show, Rob reads what podcast after on, and some tools, some Discord tools that I pay for the premium access for. That's all done through Patreon. But like I've made the effort to go into Patreon on the web, copy the RSS feed because I can't do it on the mobile app for some reason. Copy the RSS feed and put that into Pocket Casts. But that is a whole, like my parents aren't willing to do that. They're willing to download
Yeah.
to download an app, set up an account, Spotify for example, or Apple Music, and start listening and liking songs, and adding them to the
Hmm.
library and stuff like that. But it's got to be easy. And as much as I'm bullish, I guess, on Web3 versions of Patreon, um, yeah, I agree. Maybe that's something better integrated at the protocol level, but with your own front end. If somebody wanted
Yeah.
to do that instead of doing an OAuth type
That's
integration
right.
where like you got to
Yeah.
click here, you got to authorize your wallet, I guess, and then you're off to a completely different DApp or web app on the front end.
Yeah, I would also argue a big part of this is, I'm actually not sure, what the benefit necessarily of a decentralized Patreon would be over the current Patreon. The reason I say that, like, Patreon's take rate is quite low, actually. And as a creator, whether it's worth the added friction of having your users have to onboard to all this stuff compared to giving up, a take rate that's not that far off of like the credit card interchange rate.
Yeah,
It's just yeah, it's a question of whether it's if you reduce your conversion rate by like more than that take rate, you're going to make less money, right?
sure.
Um, so yeah, it's a really interesting thing. I think what we are going to see though over the next 5 to 10 years is this sort of unbundling of Patreon, where to your point, like that the app does kind of suck, right? But I don't think that's the Patreon team's fault. They're just trying to do too many things for too many different people. It like
Yeah,
reminds me a lot of Craigslist, right? Where Craigslist kind of just it's like everything to everyone, right? And it doesn't do any specific thing very well, which is why like different sort of use cases that used to happen on Craigslist have been peeled off into their own like vertically integrated ecosystems, and oftentimes those ecosystems ended up being much larger than kind of the Craigslist market, just because you could make so much better of a product by being vertical specific. So,
right.
at least obviously we're biased, but we see that playing out in music. It'll be interesting to see in other verticals like the podcast community. It makes a lot of sense. So I also subscribe to a few paid Patreon podcasts, like one for a comedian and some for a couple of others. And yeah, that flow was horrible, right? Like finding the RSS feed and figuring out how to carry it over, and then you're like, is it actually refreshing? I had like one person I subscribed to like changed their podcast publishing flow, and then I just
Oh
like
yeah,
stopped getting episodes, and I was like, oh, I haven't gotten an episode in a month or two. I wonder if like this is still a thing. And it turned out
yeah,
like, oh yeah, it had just changed, and I didn't know. So
yeah. You
um
gotta you gotta rely on the redirect to the redirect working, and sometimes it
yeah.
doesn't. 301
Yeah.
redirects can break, or somebody forgets to update it, or something like that. So,
But you're right.
yeah,
The like savior at the end of that chain, at least, is Pocket Casts is a very good app, right? And it works
yeah.
well and does what it does well. It's worth what they charge for it. But yeah, it's funny.
Cool. So I need to ask one more question, and then we'll let you go. So 250,000 artists, millions of tracks, 7 million monthly active users, or something like that. You mentioned earlier. That's all terrific. Really good. Glad to hear that. Have there been? I'm gonna have to bundle this, and you're gonna have to try and keep it quick if you wanna get out of here on time. Have there been any major copyright issues, and/or have you received any pushback from the established music industry, especially the big three record labels, over the last 2 years?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the quick answer there is, Audius does have a content moderation process, and that's
Cool.
something I think folks in the industry have actually been able to work with and work pretty well with so far. So yeah, I think as a result of that existing, we've tended to have pretty good relations with the industry broadly. But it's an interesting set of trade-offs, right? I think our belief is that decentralization does not have to mean that Audius is this complete Wild West, where folks are able to infringe content from artists, etc. That's not kind of aligned with our mission and our goals for making Audius. It's to help artists take control of their content, right? And
Yeah.
that's why a part of that has to be moderation, right? Like I can't have control of my content if random other people can also upload it whenever, right? So yeah, there's a whole moderation process there that's it functions, that's been working well for the last few years. And I think it's also helpful that our community is largely artists and fans, right? And the fans that are here because they want to support these artists. They want to have a relationship with them. um, they don't want this sort of activity to happen on the network either, right? So even
Yeah,
with that community operated moderation process, it's worked quite well so far. Yeah.
good. Glad to hear. Yeah, I would. If it was the Wild West, you'd probably get sued into oblivion, and then nobody wins except for the record labels and the lawyers. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, and it's
it's
also
better to have
yeah, but
something in
it
place.
does it does draw some what's the word? We get criticized a lot by
Ire.
like the true diehard crypto folks for there being a moderation process in Audius, right? It's just I think the practical reality of like wanting to build a product to serve artists, like your customers wouldn't want to use your product if they think it doesn't respect their rights, right?
Yeah, of course.
And I think folks don't, I don't know, in the crypto community, there seems to be this kind of intentional ignorance towards like what actual users of these things want, and towards like in favor of ideological crusades, right? That we kind of often see
Yeah.
folks embark on. So yeah.
Ideologies are important. They can move a lot of things forward, but eventually the rubber needs to hit the road, and you actually need to turn it to a product in this case. And it means you need to make trade-offs. Like it's, you know, Google let the engineers run everything for a little while, and then all of a sudden that stopped working so well. Like it's, like you can't just keep operating in the same way,
Hmm.
24/7, 365 days a year, 5, 10, 15 years. Like things, people change, markets change, laws change, whether you like it or not. People who practice law, or are interested in protecting
Yeah.
themselves, they'll come after you, and whether we like that or not, it's a reality. So I think you've taken a smart approach there to have some sort of moderation, whether it was completely centralized or whether it's community run or what have you. Having something in place to prevent yourselves from getting sued into oblivion, like Napster or even Kaza and all these other ones after that, like that, nobody wins in that situation.
Hmm.
The product dies, everything gets shut down, and then people are back to searching for something that aligns with their values better or allows them to have the freedom that they have on Audius again, when Audius could have just changed something and stayed alive. So no, I think it's smart for you to do that. And diehards are diehards. Like
Yep.
they're always the
They always will
loudest,
be.
but
Yeah.
there's always this silent middle that are just happy with the way things are.
Yeah.
and they make
Well,
a
and that's
really
the
good
vast
business
majority of
business
our
community.
yeah, it's a vast majority of our user base, right? They want that. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting. It's kind of like oh, what's that new that kind of right wing Twitter thing? I forget what it's called, but like
Gab,
the like yes, yeah,
Truth
right,
Social.
yeah, or one of the yeah. I guess there are a few now,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
I'd argue the average Twitter user probably wants there to be some form of moderation on the network, right? And yeah, so to your point, it's not even it's not even about avoiding being sued. It's just doing what's right for our artists and
Yeah.
for our community, right? And our artists have agreed that this is the way to do right by them.
Yeah.
So yeah, someone else can launch whatever Wild West audio hosting thing they want and happily have that in the future. But yeah.
Yeah. I'll end on this part. When the real Slim Shady does stand up and decides to use Audius, he doesn't want to discover that there's a fake Eminem,
Yes.
making tons of audio or whatever on the platform already. With a nice healthy leaderboard, that would be very bad for Audius and for artist relations and probably fan relations in the long run too. So yeah,
Hmm.
sorry, I had to do that reference. Roneil, thank you very much for spending some time with us here on the private podcast. if people want to check out Audius or see what you have to say on various topics, where should they go?
They should check out Audius by following us on Twitter or hopping in the Discord or following us on Instagram. So any of those, if you just search Audius, you'll find us. And then yeah, for myself, I'm honestly not super active in those social contexts or
Okay.
the public socials. My focus is on Audius, right? So uh, go follow Audius, go check it out. If you want to see retweets of Audius tweets, you can follow me as well, and see lots of retweeted content that you've already seen.
Okay, so do not expect Twitter essays from Roneil.
Yes, I'm not
Good
a
stuff.
not a thread or any of these sorts of things. I'm very
Missives. All right.
yes.
I look forward to the decentralized Substack that you will probably inevitably put out there. And in the meantime, for everybody listening or watching, thanks a lot for your time. And and until next time, stay free.